Now, I would like to, this is an honor for me to present to you the God's Messenger of Covenant, Pastor Rashad Khalid.
We're going to continue the presentation. Everyone start from the back to answer. Thanks. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. This was an excellent brief presentation of the perpetual miracle that God sent to us, that is to be witnessed by anybody in any place at any time. Anybody in Tokyo, Japan can open this and witness the miracle. This mathematically coded book. This is an original idea, and I have to take you back a few centuries actually, where the realization came first that God spoke to us in mathematics. It was about 900 years ago when a Jewish rabbi discovered this number 19 in the intact remnants of the scriptures, specifically in the prayer that was given came to them through Abraham, from the son of Abraham, just like our namaz came through Abraham. What happened about 900 years ago was that the Jews in France added a short statement to their morning prayer, which was, "Blessed are those who follow the righteous path." They just added this seemingly harmless statement. Rabbi Judah the Pious, who was living at that time, just wrote a barrage of literature, 8 huge volumes, as to why this short statement will destroy the what he called divine rhythm, or the key that causes contact between us and God. And he showed that the number 19 is the basis of the scriptures, and the language of God is speaking to us, that it is the key to the word of God. And I have it reproduced here in the appendix. Actually, Rabbi Judah the Pious, I think some of you know this, is actually mentioned in the Quran, in Surah 46, verse 10. I reproduced part of his writing about him on page 636 of this book. Now, I'm quoting from a book entitled Studies in Jewish Mysticism. It says, "The people, Jews in France, made it a custom to add in the morning prayer the words Ashrayt Menei Torah, which means blessed are those who walk the righteous way. And our Rabbi the Pious, of blessed memory, wrote that they were completely and utterly wrong. It is all gross falsehood, because there are only 19 times, now notice the number 19, there are only 19 times that the holy name is mentioned in that portion of the morning prayer. And similarly, you find the word Elohim, which means God, 19 times in the pericope of Al Shemot. Similarly, you find that Israel were called sons 19 times, and there are many other examples. Now listen to this. All these sets of 19 are intricately intertwined, and they contain many secrets and esoteric meanings, which are contained in more than 8 large volumes. Furthermore, in this section there are 152 words. That's 19 times 8. 46:10. Is it 46:10 or 42:10? Let me see. Maybe 42:10. It was not 46:10. Yes. 46:10 I say, what if it is from God, the Quran? What if it is from God and you disbelieved in it? A witness from the children of Israel has borne witness to a similar phenomenon. And I believe that this verse refers to Rabbi Judah the Pious, because if you read his writing, he's really a believer. So, what I'm trying to say is that the number 19 has been always the key. Has always been the key in God's writings. And One of the strange statements of Galileo was that mathematics is the language with which God created the universe. That was a statement by Galileo. And we come to realize now that in nature, the number 19 also, which may be God's signature, is evident in God's creation. The sun, the moon, and the earth line up in the same position every 19 years. And you can see this in detail again if you go to the library and look at the Jewish calendar. In the Jewish Encyclopedia, under calendar, you will see this, because they have to adjust the calendar once every 19 years. The human body has 209 bones, which is 19 times 11. The human fetus, it is now established that a full-term embryo is in the mother's womb 266 days, 19 times 14. This is not 267. And you see this in the textbooks in medical school. So, obviously, God puts His stamp on everything, including the Quran. The Quran is the only scripture that is intact. And this is where we have the system intact. As Behrooz shared with you some of these phenomena. Maybe you can you should over there, you can see. Just these numbers here would convince anybody that this is not a human-made book. This top number, I'm going to repeat because Behrooz went through it a little bit too fast. This number here is the number of digits. If you write every verse in the Quran, the number of every verse. For example, the first surah is 7 verses. So you write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The next surah is 286 verses. So you write next to that 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 286, and so on, all the way to the end of the Quran. So we're talking about the physical structure of this book. Every verse in the Quran, you just write the number. You end up with a long number, which we have hanging in the wall at Masjid Tucson, and the number of digits is 12,692. This number is a multiple 19. This is the number of digits in the long number, which takes about 3 pages printed by the computer. And the long number itself is also a multiple of 19. So this confirms the physical structure of the book. How many surahs and how many verses in every surah. This number here is the number of verses in the Quran. You just look at this book and take the first surah 7 verses, second surah 286 verses, third surah 200 verses. You add these numbers to come up with this total, 6346, which is also a multiple of 19. The number of surahs, of course, is 114, which is 19 times 6. The first verse, which is very famous, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, is 19 letters. Okay, 2698, this is the number of the word God in the Quran. The word Allah, from the beginning to the end, 2698. A multiple of 19. And considering how the Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, is separated in time and place, it is really incredible. In fact, when we were working on this book, we had about 6 college graduates, including 1 PhD, and we had so much difficulty just keeping track of the word God. We made so many mistakes in doing this. And the book, of course, confirms itself, because if you notice, if you open this book, any of you who has it, you'll see in English, on any page, you'll see in English that the word God is written in capital bold letters. So anyone can easily verify this. And the number of these, the word God is down written on every page. So you can look at any page and confirm that it is 6 times. This page here, page 97, has 6 words Allah in it. And you can do this randomly on any page and make sure that this count is correct. And you go to the end of the book and you see that the word God is a multiple of 19, 2698. 19 times 142. This number here is the sum of all the numbers mentioned in the Quran, without repetition. There are 30 numbers mentioned in the Quran. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 19, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 99, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, no, not 700, 500, 3,000, 5,000, 50,000, and 100,000. And you add them up, you get this total, 162, 146, which is a multiple of 19. Now you notice these are physical facts. Nobody's saying, in my opinion, the total of the numbers in the Quran is 162, 140. It's physical fact. Yes, sir.
Is Quran has only one version, or has there been different versions of Quran?
No, there's only one version.
One version. There
No,
hasn't
okay.
been any contest as to the different, no denomination.
No,
Is
there's
in
only one
conflict.
Quran. There's one Quran.
Just like in Christianity, that
There's
the
different versions of the Bible.
Bible has different versions. That is,
The King James version and there is
That's right.
Martin Luther version and so on. But the Quran is only one version. There are no differences. So this is a physical fact. It is nobody's opinion, and it's all you need to do is find numbers in the Quran and add them up. If they don't add up to a multiple 19, then the whole thing collapses and the subject is over. But this has been in existence for 20 years now, and it's been scrutinized. This research has been scrutinized more than any research in the history of humanity. Because back home they looked at all these numbers trying to find any errors, and it's been confirmed and reconfirmed that these are physical facts. This number here is the total of the verses wherever the word God is mentioned, the word Allah is mentioned. And this is really and truly awesome. Because, again, if you have a copy of this, just open it at random anywhere and see the word God. Okay, open the page 259. So, open page 259 if you have this, and I can tell you what's in it. In page 259, you see verses 25 to 33 in Surah 14. And you notice that the word God, Allah, is mentioned in verse 25. Verse 27 has 3 of them. Verse 26 has 0. Verse 28 has 1. 29 has 0. 30 has 1 word, Allah. 31 has 0. And 32 has 1. And 33 has 0. So in this, there are 3 words Allah in verse 27, but we only add 27. So we add 25 plus 27 plus 28 plus 30 plus 32. We add only the verses wherever the word Allah is mentioned, whether it is 1 time or 10 times. And this is the total in the whole Quran. It is 118, 123, which is also multiple of 19. So all these phenomena defy coincidence or defy human manufacture. And you immediately realize that we have in our hand God's message to you. You have full confidence, because this is the age of computers. People have been demanding tangible evidence. Now we have tangible evidence that this is God speaking to us, and not any human being trying to fool us. Okay, now that the book is proven the physical evidence, we have confidence that this is God speaking to us. It is not any human being with the shortcomings of human beings. And in the book we have answers to these questions. And we know that God is speaking to us. God is telling us. He created us, and He's telling us where we came from. He's telling us why we are here on this earth. And He's telling us where we go from here. And like the Quran says, it says, none can tell you this like the expert, one of the names of God, Khabir. In Arabic, none can tell you these facts like the expert. God is the supreme expert. So now I will try to share with you what God tells us about these questions. Where did we come from? You have some markers? I can mark the... Oh yes, thank you. Okay, why are we searching for these questions? Like, where did we come from? It's, we learn from Quran that we are here, we have no recollection of our previous past. But we were all in God's kingdom. You can think of us as angels. We used to be angels in God's kingdom. So if I draw a line representing all the creatures in God's kingdom billions of years ago, and this includes you and me, billions of years ago, we existed. It's very clear in the Quran that we existed in the past. For example, in Surah 7, verse 143, God said, I gathered all of you, all the descendants of Adam, and I had you bear witness that I alone am your Lord. God tells us that. But we don't have any recollection of this. We don't remember standing before God and saying, we bear witness, you are our Lord. So the Quran teaches us we don't have any remembrance of that. And this is one of the purposes of us being here, is to come into an existence where we do not remember the past and start, have a fresh start. Then we are given two messages. One message from God and one message from Satan. And we are supposed to freely make a choice. God gave us the freedom to choose. You can choose either one of them, either God's message or Satan's message. As you know, I'm going to interrupt this to what God is telling us in the middle of the subject. In the middle of the subject, Adam and Eve were in heaven, and God gave them a message. This is because all of us, I'm sure, know this. But God gave Adam and Eve a message. He said, you're in paradise, you can enjoy anything you want, but not this tree. Don't come close to this tree. That was God's message to Adam and Eve. And they stayed in heaven, God knows how long, maybe thousands, maybe millions of years. So, but the point is, for as long as they respected God's commandment, God's law, they stayed there. And then, most of you know, Satan went to them and said, eat from this tree. Okay, so now they have two messages. Hi Rashi, how are you? Adam and Eve were in heaven, or in paradise, or heaven, the same thing, and they had a message from God telling them, do not eat from this tree, and they had a message from Satan saying, eat from this tree. For as long as they obeyed, adhered by God's message, they stayed in heaven. Once they listened to Satan, they were kicked out of them. And this is what brought us here. As a second coming to this world. Not the initial, this is not the original sin. The eating from the tree is not the original sin as believed in the previous scriptures. So, this line representing all of God's creatures, including you and me, and these creatures of God have different responsibilities, different assignments of work. And depending on their duties, they have different powers. For example, if somebody assigns to you something to do in New York, your company says you must go to New York and do something and come back. They'll give you a ticket to get on a plane, fly to New York, do the job and come back. This is some power given to you. So, God's creatures have different powers. One of the most powerful creatures, not the most powerful creature, one of the powerful creatures, now we got to know as Satan, his God-given power went to his head. He had an egotistic problem. He thought he can be a God besides God. He thought he can run a dominion besides God. And this immediately created various degrees of agreement or disagreement with Satan. So let's just to put the matter in perspective, and don't to put a representation of how many creatures agreed with Satan. The vast majority of God's creatures did not agree with Satan. Only a few. I'm going to represent them by this red dot. I hope you can see it right there. So the vast majority of creatures, they said, no way, Satan cannot be a God besides God. Only God can be a God. This is from a practical point of view. There's simply more to Godhood than Satan thought. And this is reflected in this world now, that Satan cannot run the world. There are many starving children, many diseases, earthquakes, cancer. All this is Satan's incompetence, reflects Satan's incompetence in this world. These creatures that did not agree with Satan are the angels. The creatures became classified. The creatures who upheld God's absolute authority were classified as angels. The creatures that rebelled and agreed with Satan were classified as, and then further classified. Let's now classify them as rebels. They did not believe in God's absolute authority. Now I'm going to take this little dot here. By the way, this little dot represents something like 1 trillion creatures. The number of God's angels is not known to anybody except God. You see this in the Quran, in Surah 74, verse 31, where God says only God knows the number of the angels. Even the angels don't know how many of them there are. As you see, this red dot representing 1 trillion creatures, and the blue line is much larger, so there's countless numbers of angels. I'm going to extend this dot here into a long line. We're still dealing with the question, where did we come from? This line represents about 1 trillion creatures. They are the creatures that agreed with Satan. And this includes you and me in this line, to different degrees. Let's say here are the least agreeable with Satan, and these are the staunch agreeable with Satan. God gave these creatures a second chance. First of all, the angel said, since these creatures here rebelled, put them all in hell, throw them all in hell, banish them from your kingdom. And in Surah 2 verse 30, God says, no. One of the names of God is the most merciful. God wanted to give us another chance to reconsider our decision to side with Satan. In Surah 2 verse 30, God says, I know what you do not know. The angel said, throw them all in hell. And God said, I know what you do not know. What did God know that the angels didn't know? God knew that some of us, deep in our heart, we really believed in God's absolute authority. But for some reason we were swept in the crowd and we agreed with Satan to different degrees. So this line here representing the rebels, God gave him a second chance. He said, how would you like to reconsider your agreement with Satan? I'm going to give you a chance to submit outright, or you can go through an experiment where we put Satan to the test. And I use the example of, for example, Muhammad coming and saying, I can fly a plane. He's making a claim. The best way to test his claim is to give him a plane and say, fly. And this is what God did with Satan. Satan said, I can be a God, and God said, okay, I'm going to make you a God and see if you can do it. This is how he can test Satan's claim. So God was giving these rebels a choice. He said, you either submit outright, denounce your rebellion here, and submit to God's absolute authority, or you can go through an experiment and witness Satan trying to be a God. Okay, the vast majority of these creatures, the vast majority, as you agree with me, took advantage of this offer and decided to submit to God outright. They submit to God's absolute authority. So I'm going to represent the hardcore rebels, which unfortunately include you and me, by a small dot here. The vast majority of the rebels reconsidered this decision and submitted outright to God. And these include the animals, the mountains, the trees, the stars, and we read it very clearly in the Quran. I'll just give you one example of one verse, 55:6, Surah 55 verse 6, and if you read it loud to us, it will give us an idea. The stars and the trees prostrate. The stars, you can look up and see them, and the trees. So these are creatures of God who have submitted to God. They are doing their job without any deviation. And again, for some of you it's repetitious, but excuse me, but for the sake of the new people who didn't hear this before, the sun, for example, will rise and set tomorrow at precisely the time prescribed to it by God. And you can see it in the newspaper, to the second, what time the sun will rise, what time it is going to set. The moon phases follow the exact precise precision. Well, the moon is rotating around itself and around the earth in a synchronized rotation, so we never see the other side of the moon. If that rotation was off by a second, a fraction of a second, we would see the other side of the moon. We never do, because of the synchronized precision of the moon going around the earth and around itself. Okay, so these creatures here made an agreement with God. They said, we will go to that experiment of Satan trying to fly his plane, trying to be a god. We will go participate in that experiment as submitters. And again, I use the example of the horse and the dog, for example. The horse will let anybody ride him. Well, I have to back up a little bit and say that the initiation of the whole problem, which tells in the Quran as the great feud, it is in Surah 38, verse 69. The initiation of the whole problem was because of the ego. Satan had an ego. He thought out of ignorance and out of the ego that he can be a god besides God, that he can run a dominion and keep it perfectly happy. No accidents, no earthquakes, no diseases, no divorce, no traffic tickets, no headaches. He thought he can do that. And the creatures that agreed with him also had an ego problem. These are the egotistic creatures of God. We can also deal, for one time we'll deal with the issue, why did God create these creatures who rebelled? Because God knew, of course, that among his creatures some would rebel. But that would be another subject probably, that we cannot get to it tonight. The horse has no ego. When these creatures took advantage of God's offer, which we see in Surah 33, verse 72, the second offer, to denounce our crime. This is the original sin that you and I committed billions of years ago. And these creatures, they realize their crime and they're ready to pay for it. And in Surah 2, verse 54, we see a commandment to kill our ego, because we refused. When God told you and me, you're going to go down to the earth as a dog, we said, no way. But we have an ego. You and I, we have an ego. We said, no. We're going to go as humans, and we're going to take the test. And I'm so smart, I'm going to make the right choice. This is what you and I said. We refuse to come here as dogs or horses or cats or mice. So the horse comes here, lets anybody ride him, whether that person is rich or poor or tall or short or handsome or ugly, will ride the horse, and the horse will obediently do the job. And will live here 10 to 20 years and then go on redeemed to God's kingdom. That was the horse's choice. Surah 38, Surah 6, verse 38 says, all these creatures, birds flying, there are communities like you that will be gathered before God in the day of judgment. They go to the lower heaven. The human being, this is one incentive that caused us to not to do that, is that a human being that makes a choice to uphold God's absolute authority and believes that Muhammad has no power, Jesus has no power, Mary has no power, the saints have no power, nobody else has any power except God. That person makes it to the high heaven. And there's a big difference between the high heaven and the low heaven, as we see in the Quran. So, these creatures include the horses, the cats, the dogs, the stars. The stars are mainly there because there's so many of them. If they were animals and lived on this earth, we'd have no room for us. Or if God created the bigger earth, it will not be as easy for us to travel from Iran or Egypt to the States, for example. It will be a huge planet in order to accommodate all those creatures. There's a billion trillion stars out there, all in precise orbits, besides uncountless decillions of heavenly bodies. I think all of you remember Halley's Comet that comes to our solar system every 76 years, counting. 1, 2, 3, up to 76, this is 19 times 4, by the way. We know exactly when it will come. We knew it was coming in 1980, what was it, 6? This is 1985, 86. And we wait for it, but sure enough, there it comes, 76 years, and then it leaves, and we know exactly when it will come back. It's following God's law. So all those heavenly bodies, stars, sun, the moon, and so on, they're following God's law. But the reason they're up there is because there's no room for them down here on the planet Earth. So God put them there to adorn the sky. They're doing their function, and then they'll be redeemed to God's kingdom after doing the submissive role. Okay, so this tells us how bad we are. Because over here we sided with Satan. We were given a second chance, and again we sided with Satan. So we'd like to see what he's going to do. Maybe he can do it. Which means we doubted God's absolute authority. We doubted God's word. Because God said nobody can do it. And this is not egotistic on God's part. God is not egotistic. God knows that only He can run a dominion perfectly. And this is the distinction that happens now. The people who join God whatsoever of the past. Remember the great feud, or what Satan told us in the past, and what God told us, and what our comrades told us. So we come here with a fresh start, and we're getting the message, God's message and Satan's message. And we're making a choice. So this is a final chance for us to denounce that original sin and go back to God. But, like I said, the rule is we are rebels. The human beings are rebels. And the natural tendency would be to continue to uphold that opinion that you had in the past, but God alone is not enough. But God is not the only sovereign. This is why we are here. Are there any other questions on the first part? I think that's this.
How did the Satan come about?
God created all these creatures.
No, after Adam and Eve.
No, that was billions of years before Adam and Eve.
Actually, God created Satan?
Yes, of course. Yeah, God created everything.
Why God created Satan?
Okay, very good. This is the subject that I thought we may not be able to get to tonight. But let me put it very briefly. God created Satan to show us that we have the freedom of choice.
So God wanted to more or less create a game so that people can be busy with it. Making choices.
No, it's not a game. It is a natural thing that happens that a minute proportion of God's creatures. Okay, let me back up a little bit and tell you this. God does not want robots in His kingdom. We were in God's kingdom, and we were members of God's kingdom, and we had assignments, and we had jobs where there was no death. Everything was infinite. And we're told when God created death after the rebellion in order to bring us into this experiment. So God does not want robots. In fact, if I ask you if you can make robots that will clean your house, will do anything you say. This is one kind of robot that you can make. And another kind of robot that you can make is robots that can think. For example, the robot is vacuuming the carpet, and you charge them to jump out the window. The robot can think and stop and go save the child. That's another kind of robot. But that kind of robot can tell you yes or no. You can say vacuum the carpet, and the robot will say no. Because he's got a mind of his own. And there's another kind of robot that has a mind of his own, but appreciates you as the creator of the robot, to the point that whatever you tell this robot, he will do. Or it will do. Not because it is designed this way, because that robot is free. It can tell you no. It can say, vacuum the carpet. It can say yes or no. But it always will obey your orders because it appreciates you and knows your greatness, appreciates you and loves you so much that they never say no. Now, what kind of robot would you want in your house? Which kind of the three?
But the situation is that sometimes the God's part has not been explained to a person, and the devil's side has been well represented to a person. So the person is not fairly treated. It is just like you and I are in argument, and a third person has been briefed on your side of situation, but has not been briefed on mine.
No, you
So
can
he's
be
not going to
sure.
be a good judge.
Yeah, no, you can be sure that you're given all the relevant details.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Suppose
Yes.
somebody has been created in a segment of the planet
Yes.
where none of explanation of devil and God has been explained to him.
Yes,
So he's
even that.
innocent. Now, for him to be going to a purgatory,
Yes.
it is totally unfair, and I don't think
First of
God
all-
is unjust.
Okay, first of all, he's not innocent, because we are here in the first place because he committed that crime, that original sin. You and I were not innocent when we were born. Because we had that crime that we committed. You see,
Yeah, but the thing is, you mentioned that he has been given a second chance
Right.
to be born as a human
we
being.
refused it.
Yeah,
We refused that second chance to denounce our rebellion.
and that's right.
We refused that. And
Yeah.
we continue to be hardcore rebels.
Yeah, and this person
So
wants to be
still God
a
is giving us. Yes. You know about the person in the desert, someone else, we never heard any of this.
Yes.
Right? Even that person is born with God's message and Satan's message.
Yes.
And we have an example in the Quran of that person. His name is Abraham. He was out in the desert and he looked at the sky and he looked at the sun and the moon. He looked around him and he discovered God. Without any book, without any messenger, without anything. He was just out in the desert. Because we have this natural instinct in us. You know, if you ask yourself, why are you here? Why are you so interested? It's because there's an instinct in you that you want to search. There's an instinct in you and in me to search for our Creator.
Yeah, but that's provided that instinct has been placed in somebody.
Right, it has been.
There are a lot of
That
people, there are a lot of people that instinct may be missing in them. How about them?
No, there is not any human being where this part is missing. But God said, I mentioned it earlier, God gathered all the descendants of Adam and put that instinct in them. You know, the bird lays the eggs and sits on the eggs until they hatch. She keeps those eggs at a constant temperature until they hatch. And then the little babies come out of the egg and she goes out, brings food and feeds those babies. She didn't go to school to learn this. This is natural instinct.
So
And this is exactly the instinct we have in each one of us.
So therefore, there is a big assumption that this instinct is placed in human beings.
It is not an assumption any longer. It is proven by mathematics. And God is telling us that I put this instinct in you, and it's repeated in the Quran. You probably heard the words deen or fitra. Is this familiar to you? Fitra? Deen or fitra?
Yes, yes.
Deen, the natural instinct in you is the correct belief that is worshipping God alone. Yeah, it's repeated in the Quran. So it is no longer an assumption, because we have it proven by physical evidence. It's not my opinion or anybody's opinion.
So we even give murderers a chance for redemption because we believe that there is a chance inside them that they will be released.
Yes, we have the instinct from God, and we have a constant companion that represents Satan, that is born with us at the same time and has our name. And this is called in the Quran, Qareem, constant companion, that has your name. You're not schizophrenic, but there are two of you. Qareem. Qareem, is this her name? Farsi? What is it? No. Yes. Yes. It's a constant companion from birth to death that is with me. My name is Rashad Khalifa, and my companion's name is Rashad Khalifa. And he stays with me to represent Satan's point of view from birth to death. Now, hopefully, halfway through my life, I will convince my companion to worship God alone. And this is why Satan uses his representative, his ambassador. So what we're doing in this world is we're listening to God's message and Satan's message, and we're doing, God will give us the free will to choose either side. And this is how we get redeemed together, back to God's kingdom. If we make the wrong choice, we will eternally exiled from God's kingdom. This is a final chance for us. And it is in spite of the angels wish to have us all banished, which makes sense. If you run a company, if you have a company and your employees have loyalty to another company, your competitors, you don't want them in your company. So, well, fine, go ahead to the other company. You're loyal to them. So even in our daily life, we practice this principle. And God wants in His kingdom only creatures who are loyal to Him, who know Him. They know that he is the only one who can run things perfectly. Satan is running the world now by permission from God, which is in the Quran. Satan is the God of this world with a small G, and he cannot do it. Things are getting out of hand. The latest problem Satan is having is AIDS, for example. So you can think, and he tries to force it. He's working very hard with the scientists to create a cure for AIDS. But because before something else will pop up. Before 100 years ago, there was no such thing as AIDS. So we can think of Satan as